demo, we will be canning. So these will be shelf-stable jams that we are going to make today. We're going to make some peach jellies or jams. I was told that it's actually a jelly because we're going to use the chunks of the peaches in there as well, or a preserve. So that's what we'll be making today. I've got my water canning bath over here. I've already started that. I'll walk us through it. We've got a pan, peaches, sugar, and pectin, lemon juice, and cinnamon. That's it. So not too many ingredients for us today. Those of you that are in Colorado, these are Palisade peaches. My sister lives in Grand Junction, so we get the best peaches that there is. And what I did with these ones is I canned a few last year. I'll show you those in a moment. But what I did was I got a little tired of canning. So I put them in a freezer bag. I have one of those food savers. So I put them in this bag. I saved them. I couldn't can any more last year. So now I'm here to can some of these Palisade peaches with you, which is a great option if you do get tired of that. A lot of times when we have our garden, we've got a lot of those fresh produce and we don't know what to do with it, so this is a great option. You can can, and you can also do that freeze option. If you are worried about your hot water bath, maybe that seal doesn't hit exactly right, I'll show you how to do that. You can always just throw your jams, jellies, produce in that freezer. I just use the same jars, fill them up a little bit less on the rim so that when they freeze and expand, they don't explode out of that jar. So, or you can just use them in the self-storage bags, Tupperwares, etc. So I think that's kind of all the pre-stuff we're going to do. We'll get started now. I'm going to do a little bit less of this recipe that it calls for about 4 pounds of peaches. I've only got about 3 pounds, so I did some math here, so I'll be doing a little bit different, but you can also just follow that recipe with the 4 pounds of peaches. To start though, what I did was I took my jars and I washed them in the dishwasher. The dishwasher does a really good high heat cycle, obviously with soap and water. So I've washed my jars. I've used these jars before, but I'm going to I'm not going to reuse my lids. So the lids is something you want to buy each time. The jars you can reuse. And now my hot water bath is coming to a boil. I put my jars inside of it while it's heating up because that heats that glass up. If we take our cold jars and we're going to add some hot liquid to them, what that does is that then maybe will crack those jars. And you might not notice it the first time you use it, but after you do it 3 or 4 times, you can get a big split, and then you're going to get glass all in your hot water bath. So I just take these, I've brought it up a level so they're all resting in here. I think you can see them in the picture, you can. So those are slowly heating up. I've also put my lids and my rims in here just to get one last sanitize of those before we put them into our jellies. So that's what I've done without us here. I've weighed out my peaches and that. So now we're going to get started. We're going to turn on our stove to a medium heat. We're going to take those peaches and we're just going to put those in there immediately. So I'm going to warm up those peaches first, then I'm going to add the sugar in. And I will say this isn't the healthiest recipe that we're doing today. Jams and jellies obviously have a lot of sugar, but it's all about moderation. We're not going to eat this whole jar of jelly on one sitting. Just a little bit here and there. Treat yourself to some jams or jellies. So just pre-warning, this is not a healthy version. I have made some jams or jellies with maple syrup before, and so you can switch out that sugar for maple syrup. It seems to work pretty good. One thing I will say is they're not as thick. So something about that sugar, pectin, and the fruit mixing together, you really get a good, more solid. The ones that I do without that sugar, they're a little bit watery. Just pre-warning you. And it's not that they taste any different, they just are a little bit waterier. So we're going to bring these peaches up to a good boiling temperature. We're going to add for me it's going to be 3 cups, but if you're following the recipe, it's going to be 4 cups of sugar. Then we'll add our pectin in last. So I've got just I like this brand better than the store-bought one. Again, sometimes when we buy the just generic brands, it doesn't, I'm trying to get this to focus, there we go. It doesn't get as quite as thick of a jelly. I feel like with this Ball brand, it really gets a good thickness to our jellies. And this is not the first time I've done this before, so I do have some tips for this. So I like to buy a little bit of the nicer brand. I think it produces a better jelly. All right. So the reason we add this last, we're going to only put in our pectin for about a minute. If we put our pectin in with our peaches too early, what happens is that it denatures, it untwines those elements inside of there, and so it doesn't actually work anymore. So you only want to use that for about a minute. You don't want to heat it up too much, or else it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Just a little bit. Got a little stem in there. And then this is still warming up. Those of you that are at sea level, obviously your water will boil a little bit faster than mine. I'm at an altitude of, I was going to do it on my watch exactly to tell you. So at 1,000 feet, you're going to boil your jams for 10 minutes. We'll do this together. But for every 1,000 feet elevation gain from that, you need to add another minute. Oh, it's not going to work. I'm going to guess that I'm about 5280. So I need to do it for about 15 minutes once it's in there. So we'll do that for about 15 minutes. That's the process. It's going to take a little bit longer of our cooking demo today. Everything else should be pretty quick. While that's heating up, let's get started with our lemon juice. I'm going to use fresh lemon juice. Feel free to use a pre-bought kind of squeeze one. And then we need 1/4 of our lemon juice here. What that does is it just adds a little bit of acid. So for me, I got to pick some of those seeds out. But if you've got that nice pre-bought one, maybe you put it in your water sometimes, you can just pour 1/4 of a cup in there. We can add our lemon juice right away. It's not going to do anything to the sugar-peach combo here. All right, that lemon's going to be tapped out. Now that it's summertime, I am in like a lemonade craze. I always want lemonade. I feel like this time of year, lemonade is the drink of choice. All right, so once you measure out that 1/4 of a cup, you are going to just kind of place that into your boiling pot. My peaches are not quite ready yet, so I'm going to pick out a few lemon seeds that I can see here. Just because we have to. All right. Here, lemon seed. There we go. All right, so I've got 2 more to get out of here, and then I can add that in. Perfect. So now we add that 1/4 of a cup into there. So now my peaches are starting to boil. What I'm going to need is one of these smashers. So you're going to get a good arm workout here. You're just going to smash those peaches so that they kind of come into a liquid. You can also food process these peaches if you've had them before. They're so soft that I felt like if I food processed them, they were going to get a little too disintegrated. So I don't even need to get out that food processor. Also, it's not another thing I have to wash at the end of this. So the less dishes I make, the happier I am at the end of my cooking cycle. So we're just going to be mashing up our peaches. And so they're going to slowly get into a liquid form here. You may notice there is a little bit of kind of liquid coming out of those. If you were to use fresh peaches, you'd have a little less of that liquid, but since I froze these first, all that liquid got pooled into that freezing process, and I drained a lot of it out, so this is just a little bit extra, so I might add 1 more scoop of that pectin here. And for me, I'm going to, the recipe says you can use cinnamon or allspice. I personally do not like allspice at all. I think it has a weird flavor. So feel free to use the allspice if you would like. I'm going to use the cinnamon and stick to the regular cinnamon here. All right. I'm going to keep mashing as my peaches come up into temperature. I haven't smelled these peaches in about a year. They usually come into harvest time about October, September time. So I'm excited for these. We've ate all of our peaches we've had already, so these will be a nice treat, reminder of our fall harvest here. So now I'm going to start to add my sugar. And again, I'm doing 3 cups, but you're going to do the full. No, I'm doing 4 cups, and the recipe says 5. Whew. So you're just gonna add those. I'm gonna add 2 and then I'm gonna stir because this is a lot of sugar. I want it to incorporate well. You can use a spatula or you can just continue to use your smasher. I'm sure that probably has like a regular name, but I'm gonna call it a smasher for today's class. A meat smasher. Got 2 cups incorporated. I've got 2 more to go. We're gonna go for 3, depending on how many pounds of peaches. And 1. And 2. Perfect. All right, so that is all of my sugar that I'm gonna use. Could scooch that over to the side. My hot water bath to the right is starting to boil. You can probably hear it. So I'm going to be mindful of that. We don't want it to boil over. For me, it takes so long for things to boil here. I'm actually going to keep that on when we're adding stuff into our peach mixture. All right, so you're going to feel that sugar at the bottom. Continue to stir until it's incorporated through that. We don't want that grainy sugar at the bottom. Well, I gotta check how many scoops of my pectin I'm supposed to use. You can use 1 packet, or what you can do is you can do it like me, where I know I'm gonna use this again, where 1 box isn't enough, you can buy this bigger one. So 1 box equals 4 tablespoons of this. So I'm going to use 4 tablespoons, and I said I have a little bit more liquid, so I'm actually gonna use 5. Stirring, stirring, just to make sure I get a nice thick jelly. All right, so I'm at a high heat here. I'm going to decrease to a lower heat temperature so that I can add in my 4 tablespoons of my pectin. Because again, we don't want it to get too hot or it won't do what it's supposed to do. 1, and I'm actually going to set a timer for a minute so that we make sure that we don't overdo it. I'm telling you, I've done that before. You start to let your jars hang out on the counter for about a day and you think, why is this jelly so liquid? But that's what happens. So now I'm going to incorporate that. I'm going to stir fast because I only have 1 minute to incorporate that. Then I'm going to take this off of the heat. Just going to let it do its thing, kind of set up. I'll start to take my jars out of their sanitation heat up area over here, and we'll be pouring into our jars. One thing that I do not have that I wish I had is a funnel. So I'm going to be just kind of scooping it into there. Once I mainstream this jam process, I should get a funnel for sure. Oh, I forgot my cinnamon. I'm going to have 12 seconds to stir. And you're going to add in that half a tablespoon of cinnamon. Whew, close call. Not that it wouldn't taste bad without it, but peaches and cinnamon go well together. All right, I'm at my minute. I'm incorporating that cinnamon. I'm taking it off of the heat. So now we got a nice brown, peach-colored, yummy mixture here. Okay, so that's off the heat. That's incorporated the cinnamon. I'm taking my jars off of their heat. So you're going to need one of these. I should have looked up what this is called. Jar grabber is what it's going to be called. So you're going to grab those jars. Actually, they're not too hot. I've got pretty good calluses on my hands, so when I touch hot things, it doesn't faze me as much. My husband's kind of a wimp about it, so he always needs to use pot holders when I don't feel like you need to. All right, the jars are going to kind of air dry right here on this towel. You want to make sure you're using a clean towel. Again, we don't want any of those bacteria to get inside of our jars now. So our jars are sitting out here. You can also get nice little magnetized wands to get out that lids and the rims that I put down in there. I'm going to just be doing some scooping out with my grabber. It'll be like that arcade game where you choose what toy you want, but perfect. So I've sanitized 5 jars. I don't have that much jelly, so I think 5 jars is going to be enough. If you're making a larger batch of this, you'll definitely want to use more jars. And you want to make sure your hands are nice and clean when you're doing this process. So you want to make sure those hands are clean because, again, that bacteria, if it gets inside of our jars, is going to cause it to have those jar lids pop, which is fine. It's okay if you have a few of those jar lids that pop up. It's totally natural. Maybe sometimes the lid didn't get a good seal. It's a process, so one or two of the steps doesn't go exactly right. Just put those in your freezer or consume that immediately. That could be your immediate jar that you have a tasty treat with right away. One thing that I did learn through canning, I just started canning last year, so this is all new-ish for me, is that you need to let your lids rest for 24 to 48 hours. So originally when I did my jams last year, I thought, dang it, I'm not good at this. I don't have any of my lids sealed. They get sucked down. But they need to rest on the counter. And once you rest them on the counter, you can actually hear them pop sometimes. So if you're nearby, you'll hear them pop, and they will make a nice seal. And then after that time, some of them don't pop all the way down. Then that's when you'll maybe need to, I have to use a second utensil here. That's when you'll need to put them in the freezer or consume them right away. So that rest period allows them to cool, not expand. Got one more lid here. I was scooping out. I told you it'd be a process. Perfect. All right. So again, it takes a long time for water to boil. I'm going to keep this giant water bath going. I'm going to place this back in there, and we'll stage our jars, and we'll collapse it down together. And we're going to move our jelly into our jars now. This is kind of our clean zone here. I'm going to grab my utensil that I'm going to use. I use just kind of a scooper, and I'm going to scoop and shovel the jelly in there. We need to do a good job of cleaning up the outside of our jars once we're done, because that's, again, where that seal is going to be. So I just kind of pour it in there. Slow and steady wins the race here. If anything is going on in the chat box, this would definitely be the time to get a good chat going, because this, again, is slow and steady wins the race. I told you I need a funnel. I got one for my car when I changed my oil myself, but I felt like that probably shouldn't be used for indoor cooking. And again, it's okay. I'll show you. I got a little bit on the outside. That's not going to ruin the jam because I got that. I'm going to use a paper towel. I'm going to clean up really good on the outside of that. And as you can see, we got a nice color here. We got some cinnamon in there. We got some chunks. If you don't like the chunks in your, or tasty bits of fruit, I should say, is a more appetizing way, in your jams or jellies, what you're going to do is you're going to run it through a food processor. Then what you're going to do is you're going to strain off all of that pulp. Then you can use, I got one out, a cheesecloth, or this is just a reusable bag I use. So I do this when I do my berry jellies. I just have some elderberries in my backyard, and then I get all those seeds out with this cheesecloth, and then you just squeeze, and then all the juice comes out. And that's how you kind of remove the tasty bits from your jelly. When you're creating your jelly, you want to fill up to that bottom line there. Because what that does is that's less air, less bacteria that's going to create here. I've done it before where you can do halfway, they just don't last as long. These ones are going to last 12 to 18 months. You can do less. To be careful of it though, because again, that more air can produce not as good of a seal, and there's also more space for that bacteria to grow. So if you can, I know we're going to have a little bit left over. It's hard to measure exactly. I've got a bunch of different jar sizes here. Like this is a wide-mouthed one. This is a little bit smaller, and then you can do even those sample sizes, those small ones. That's what I do for Christmas presents. I just jam a bunch of stuff in those small portions, and then I give out jams. Palisade jam, elderberry. My aunt had an apple tree this year, last year I guess now, and it was so many apples that we couldn't even begin to pick as many apples as was on the tree. So I made some apple jelly and then apple sauce, and I'll show you guys all of the things I made last year once I finish this process. Applesauce is so easy in your pressure cooker. All you do is you just pressure cook apples with the skins on is how I did it, extra fiber. And then with those skins on, they kind of just turn into a pulp. You smash it like we're doing here, and then you can add it into your jellies, just like this. Ooh, this is tricky. Woo! Okay. And again, we're going to wipe those jars off really good, and then we're going to add them back in. And again, I'm at 15 minutes for my altitude, so don't always do 15. If you are at a different altitude, again, that pectin can be very sensitive. So if you overboil your jars on your kind of sealing process, what's going to happen is you're going to get watery jellies. And I'm in Colorado, so those of you that are in Colorado, Fort Collins area, probably adjust accordingly as well. Oh yeah, now we're streamlining this. I got it down. I think I'm gonna have enough for one more. So we'll make 4 today. This one's not gonna be a full one, so again, I am gonna use this one for my right now jelly, just because it's not gonna fill all the way up. I had those sample sizes a little bit smaller, then you could do that. So this one is not going to go into our bath. It's a little too low, but that's fine. All jars are created equal, even if they don't have all the jelly. They'll get 8. All right, so I'm rinsing off now the outsides of the jars. This one I'm not going to worry about. I'm actually going to save this lid, though, because I haven't used this lid. I'm going to grab an old one. We save our old lids. Sometimes we pack our lunches, our salads in these jars, or anything you'd like. So I'm going to use an old lid and room for that one. That one's going to go to the side. So now I'm just going to wipe off the outsides, really clean it up with that paper towel, making sure that on the outside there isn't any of that. And then the top. Try not to get the paper towel in there as well. Think of that as kind of a sanitation area. Then you're going to take one lid, you're going to place it on, and you're going to firmly push that on. You can tell these are still warm. If this is taking you a little bit longer than it took me, maybe you're doing a bunch, you need to make sure that they don't get too cold. You take a cold liquid and we start to put it in this hot water, again, that glass is going to break. It's going to go from one extreme to the other. So we want to make sure that we're keeping these pretty warm. If anybody had a trick for how to keep these from breaking, that would be a great thing to put into the chat. Really cleaning up the outsides, taking my lid, placing it on. And my jars have pretty much dried while they were sitting here, so they're not too wet. But you'll notice the lids are up. That's fine. I thought at first I had all bad lids, but that's fine. The lids are going to get sucked down at the end of this process. So I thought it was an immediate thing, but it is not. This is my favorite jar. This is my grandma's jar here. She gave me a bunch of jars recently. So this is one of my grandma's jars. Who knows what's been inside this jar? History of jars. Right, so lid goes on that one. Secure it. And then if there is some sticky stuff over here, it's good to wash it off, but it's not crucial to the process, that outside edge. Now I'm going to take my 3. If they're too hot to touch, you can put them in. I've got let's see how many I've got here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jars possible for canning. They've got a nice little position. I position them in there. Again, you can use this. And then I lift this up off of here, and I slowly lower it down. Now they're kind of hang out in their spot, and they're just going to go. I'm going to set that timer right now. I've got 15 minutes. All right. Place that lid on there. They just do their thing. You don't want a fast rolling bubble either. If your pot gets really hot and it starts big air bubbles, it's going to jostle those jars around. They're going to make contact with the outside edge. Then they can potentially crack again. So if the bubble starts to get out of control, mine's getting a little hot, I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Still about that boiling water temperature though. Soft bubble instead of that harsh bubble. From here, now I'm going to tell you about the things that I made last year. So while that's going, we've got some time. These are Palisade peaches I also did last year. These are whole or halved peaches that you could use for cobblers, everything like that. So you can also do this recipe with just the halved peaches if you're not into jellies or jams. So that's a great option for you. This one is this is apple pie filling that I made. So apple pie filling here, that one's got some sugar and you can use that. And to make apple pie, I made an apple pie at Thanksgiving with one of the jars that I had harvested and made into the filling. So if you were looking for some Thanksgiving recipes, you can in the summer, you can use this stuff all year round. So this one is my tomato sauce that I made. I grew a lot of cherry tomatoes, the really small ones. And so for me, there is seeds in this one for this sauce because I did not want to peel every single little cherry tomato that there was. And so I just food processed it and used all the same sauce ingredients. This one you use citric acid instead of that pectin. So add that citric acid into that and that is going to be what preserves it. So there is seeds in it, but to me it tastes exactly the same. This one I used a big jar because with sauce, you know, you want a little bit more depending on how many people you're feeding. So this is my sauce. And then the last one that I made before the frost, the first frost, I still had a lot of green tomatoes. So I was looking up what can I do with all these green tomatoes. I know that you can leave them in a bag on the counter and they start to turn, but I mean I had a lot of tomatoes. So what I made was this is green tomato curry. So they take those green tomatoes, you pulse them up. They do have a little bit of a sour taste, but it kind of goes well with that curry. We've had it, I think 2 times. This is the last little bit of it here as we get to that last final push of summer. So this is a green curry. We mix it with a can of coconut milk. And then we have a curry meal. We can do it with tofu, chicken, etc. So lots of options. I don't have any pickles left. We made pickles last year as well. The pickles turned out really good. So good that there's not any of the pickles left right now. So the pickles, the cucumbers, there's little peppercorns you can buy. Go great in there and they make a really good pickle. I'm a pickle kind of fanatic. So for me, I was very excited that I grew some cucumbers, and I've got cucumbers out there right now for the same thing. I'm actually going to taste this jelly while we're waiting. We've still got about 10 minutes here. So this is what it looks like. See if you can see this. I like the chunks in it. Or tasty bits, I decided to call them. Chunks doesn't seem like a very sophisticated way to say that. Oh, that's good. Woo! Can anything that has 4 cups of sugar in it be bad? I mean, honestly, so tasty, tasty. Sometimes what I do with some of these jams or jellies is I put them in my oatmeal in the morning. So oatmeal's kind of like needs some life. So you can add just like a little bit of the jam or jelly and then it gives that oatmeal a delicious taste. We still got 11 minutes, everybody, so okay, that's enough. Jelly is not a meal. It's all about portions. So I'll just start to tell you what we are going to do at the end of this. I know this is one of our longer cooking demos, so feel free to stay on if you want. But what I'm going to do, once it's done, I'm going to take my chompers. I'm going to take the jar out. I'm going to use this one as an example. And I'm going to place it back again into this tablecloth area that I've set for our cans. Then they're going to sit there again, and they're just going to rest. And I will send a picture in the Teams chat of what they look like. So those lids are going to get sucked down. It does take a little bit of time for those to do that. So I think I'm going to stop the recording right now, and we can just open up for questions, just because I just showed you what we're going to do. We're going to set it down, and then we're just going to leave it. So that's the only thing we're going to do. So I'm going to stop that recording. I'm actually going to stop sharing